Warning, this episode contains strong language or mature themes. Parental discretion is advised. Welcome to this podcast is Uncalled For. On today's edition, thoughts on the NFL and St. Louis. And now, your host for this podcast, Mike Chernevsky.
Welcome to the podcast. So once in a while, a topic may come up that doesn't translate well to interviews, or there may come a time where I might not have interviews to publish, which makes it a necessity to do something like this, where I can talk about thoughts and have those ready to go if needed. So today's the first of those little segments. And we're going to talk about something that's already been brought up 3 times on the podcast. And that is my thoughts on how the NFL treated the city of St. Louis. Despite the fact that I live in Kansas City, I was, for the longest time, a fan of the team formerly from St. Louis. But that came to an end the nights that the NFL decided in a secret ballot by a vote of 30-2 to disregard their own Los Angeles committee's recommendation to move 2 teams that really were going to move. I honestly believe that the California solution is what it was called. That didn't work. And St. Louis, a great sports town, just 4 hours drive east of where I am, got screwed despite having a cogent and funded, barely funded, but still funded plan in place to keep their team. I don't want to rehash what I've already talked about in previous podcasts, so I will go and replay for you on this episode 2 segments from the Winning Side Coaches podcast. The first is right after the team was moved, and the second is my reaction to the following lawsuits about a year later. That lawsuit is still in courts. When you take a look at the whole situation so far in the courts, St. Louis has been winning, and that's a good thing. So maybe, just maybe, we'll finally get some accountability from the National Football League and those owners in particular. So I'm going to shut up right now and throw it back to the past.
Last week, kind of last week or so, the 3
earlier
teams,
this week.
Or this week. Well, this week we'll get to the vote, but I'm talking about for like last week.
Okay, with the filings.
The filing. The Raiders, the Chargers, and the Rams all filed to relocate, to Los Angeles. This week, however, the owners were deciding on the votes on which teams can or cannot be able to move to L.A. And the surprising one, through all the things in there, the St. Louis Rams are going back to Los Angeles. And I was really shocked on this in a sense that with all the stadium proposals and everything else in there, I thought St. Louis was going to be the one that really stayed in there, and the Raiders and Chargers were going to be the ones that are moving in. But the owners voted 30-2 to allow the Rams to relocate. And St. Louis fans, as well as just Rams fans in general, are pretty pissed off about what just happened through this whole process. And there's already been lawsuits already filed by the fans. So I'll let give it to Mike, and he has more of the details on it, being a passionate fan than.
Yeah. There's a part B to that vote, too. The Chargers were given the option to move to L.A. as well, which, from what I've read the last couple of days, they will almost certainly take that option. And it makes sense for the Chargers to be there because San Diego County borders Orange and Riverside counties in California, and they're both part of the greater L.A. area. And they've said themselves 25% of their ticket sales come from Los Angeles. So, where to begin? You talked about stadium plans in the former cities. Oakland had no plan. San Diego, they say they had a plan, but it had to come up to public vote, and the earliest they could vote for such a plan would be this coming summer. St. Louis had a plan. Was it perfect? No, but they had a plan that got through the St. Louis Board of Aldermen, their city council, and everything. Barely, but it got through, and had the blessing of the mayor. Everything. It was backed by Governor Nixon and undertaken by David Peacock, the former president of Anheuser-Busch. Kind of a big deal. And the Peacock plan was torpedoed, mostly by the league. Despite the fact that the league themselves kept encouraging them, hey, you're doing a good job. Just get to the benchmark, and we'll help you along the way. I should point out that before a couple of key votes on this matter, the NFL contacted St. Louis media and pretty much said, this plan's not going to pass, and there's no way that the owner will agree to these terms. Everything. So I'm thoroughly convinced that the fix was in from the league office level. And I'm going to call it two individuals in particular. One is Commissioner Roger Goodell, who was clearly in the tank the whole time. And another is their now former executive vice president, Eric Krubman, who called in to a certain St. Louis radio station. I will provide that link if it's still available. And pretty much trashed the Peacock plan on St. Louis Airways for about 45 minutes. The next guilty party in all this, of course, is Enos Stanley Kroenke, the owner of the now L.A. Rams, who refused to even negotiate with, not even to negotiate with Peacock, the Peacock Group. He failed to talk with anyone in St. Louis, media or otherwise, for the last 4 years. No public appearances, nothing for 4 years. And if you've read the relocation paper or even heard about the relocation papers, no, they're just full flat-out lies. Yes, and their claim is because the city failed to live up to this clause. And let me explain this clause to you. The Edward Jones Dome, their lease with the Rams had a top-tier clause saying that the stadium had to be in the top 25% of NFL stadiums quality-wise at 10-year benchmarks, right? They waived the first 10 years. They waived those benchmarks. Georgia Francieri was still alive and still the owner at the time, and she's like, no, St. Louis has been good to me and to the team, so I see no reason to and she was dying at the time, breast cancer. She saw no reason to have to put too much burden on the city. Everything. Fast forward to just a few years ago, this is coming up again, and Kroenke wanted to live up to that part of the lease, and they submitted a proposal that would have cost $700 million, 100% of it in public money, which the city didn't have, and the authority that runs the Edward Jones Dome, they don't have taxing authority, so they wouldn't have been able to raise that kind of money. And from Kroenke's point of view, that's when he decided to break off negotiations. He didn't even try after that point to even come up with a stand proposal for St. Louis. So, no question about this is 100% on him. And for him to say that St. Louis is a dying city, dying metropolitan area, I refuse to use that other M word, with these very inaccurate statistics, specifically only St. Louis City, not even St. Louis County or any of the surrounding counties in the St. Louis metropolitan area. And for him to claim that St. Louis is just a baseball town, that's one that really has me sick, not just from Kroenke, but from all media outside of St. Louis, apparently, that St. Louis is just a baseball town. The drop in attendance over the last 12 years, so that's easy to explain. Because remember, the Rams sold out from when they first moved to town in 95 to about 2007. And we have to keep in mind, the Rams have not posted a winning record in 12 years. They haven't made the playoffs in 9 years. And by the way, that 12-year span includes the worst 5 years record-wise in NFL history, 15 and 65 from 2007 to 2011. And he refuses to take responsibility for that, and he makes the argument, I spent all the money on coaching and play. So what? It's about actually getting wins on the field. And certainly from a wins standpoint and a attendance standpoint, look at the other teams that he owns. Same damn thing. Lousy performance on the field, resulting in no people showing up. Just look at the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. That Kroenke is evil. Simple as that. Evil and greedy, too. And the next person that needs to be called out in all this is Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, who was Kroenke's biggest advocate among the other 31 owners, and actually proposed this BS to the NFL, despite the fact that the commissioner's own selected LA committee voted 5-1 for the Carson plan backed by the Chargers and Raiders. The one dissenting vote was Clark Hunt, our own owner here in Kansas City. And his rationale is only one team should move to LA. I'm pretty sure he was talking about the Chargers. So at least those 6 men had a conscience, because we've talked about ad nauseum that Oakland and San Diego have the worst stadium situations in the National Football League right now. Jerry is all about the money as well. He doesn't give a damn about the people that he just helped screw over. And for him, after that vote, to say, San Luis is a good football city. Fuck you, Jerry. Seriously, there's one owner in particular that's absolutely responsible. It is Jerry Jones. And I hope that anyone listening to this podcast today doesn't spend another dime on the Dallas Cowboys or at Jerry World or anything like that. And the last person I need to call out right now, there's several Missouri politicians that need to be called out for this, for their part in the sabotage of the Peacock plan. Most specifically, Senator Rob Schaaf, Republican, St. Joseph. This guy is a freaking hypocrite. Because he obviously has no problem with tax dollars going to the Kansas City Chiefs and upgrading Arrowhead Stadium. Heck, his town is the home to the Chiefs training camp. And to do nothing to help out another Missouri team is hypocrisy. I hope anyone in St. Joe area or Platte County, because his district does include all of Platte County. I hope someone, a Republican, Democrat, I don't care, someone needs to run against this guy. I don't know what the term is, but someone needs to run against this guy and hopefully get him voted out of office. That's all the people that need to be called out for this. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I could tell the passion of your voice that that you really are a true Rams fan, and just to see all the mess that has been going on in this situation, it's really bad, because I honestly think, with having the Chiefs and the Rams play for the Governor's Cup via either preseason or regular season was always kind of like a little neat, rivalry. But now, this thing moving into L.A., it's just like, oh, well, ho hum. My biggest thing is this, I mean, I understand, why the NFL wants to try to get a team out there to L.A. I get it because it's a big city, It's entertainment, That's what the NFL is, and they want a team, to be on there. However, I always go back to the situation. If the Rams and the Raiders left that same year, and basically moved on to different cities, why all of a sudden go back to L.A. again? I mean, because let's face it, when you get your new stadiums or you're going to be building new ones real soon, you're going to have to play by Los Angeles rules, because it's almost like you're going to have ways to pay for it because we're not going to give you too many tax breaks. It's hardly any. Because where are they giving their tax breaks to? To the entertainment studios, because they know that's where they make their money at. And and basically sports is kind of like more toward the middle, toward the bottom tier of entertainment. And, don't be surprised, within, say, another 15 or 20 years that, if they start to bottoming out in L.A., that these teams, depending upon what happens with the Chargers situation, move out of again, that they're going to have to find up another place. Now I don't know. I think what the situation is that if the Chargers don't move to join in with the Rams on their stadium project, that the Raiders have an option to possibly get in there as well. But
that's correct.
I'm kind of wondering now, with Al Davis' son being in charge of the Raiders, if he isn't able to move to L.A., will he consider possibly looking at San Antonio as relocating?
I'm glad you brought that up because that has come up recently. That's if Mark Davis cannot get a stadium done in Oakland, then there's no reason for me to be optimistic about it. And I should also point out this would be a return for the Chargers too. I think people tend to forget that their very first year in existence in the old AFL, they were in LA. So, and you bring up using public money. The NFL just set themselves up with a very bad precedent with St. Louis. St. Louis was willing to spend, I think the final was $400 million in taxpayer money going into a $1.1 billion project, which will now not be built. Other cities of similar size or smaller to St. Louis can now point to this situation. No, St. Louis was willing to give you money to build a stadium, so and you turned away from them. So why should we listen to you? I'm going to use this situation. It's fairly unlikely. If Clark Hunts were to tell Kansas City, build me a new stadium or I'm moving elsewhere, Kansas City can now use St. Louis as an example. Why you turned away St. Louis money? So why should we do a damn thing to help you out? And I realize that's a hypothetical, but you get my point. And Kansas City, by the way, 2 million people versus St. Louis, 2.8 million. So yeah, this whole thing has me very angry. So I hate to say it, but the Rams have now lost me as a fan because of this.
Yeah.
And a lot of the old players, especially the Greatest Show on Turf players, they're upset about this too. I've heard Ray Evers with Torrey Holtz, Orlando Pace, Isaac Bruce, Dick Vermeil, Mike Martz. They're all disappointed about what's happened. And I think Kurt Warner even said he's disappointed about what's happened as well. And this is now the second time that St. Louis has lost a NFL team. The first, of course, was the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Who were there from 1960 to 1988 before moving to Arizona. And that situation was a little different. In that situation, Bill Bidwill, the owner, still owner, actually, is no longer running the team. He tried to get a stadium done in St. Louis at that time, and just couldn't happen politically. At the time, there was no political will in the late 80s to do such a thing for him. So he had no choice. And then they waited for, 10 years playing at Arizona State before moving into their current home, the University of Phoenix Stadium.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it is very likely that St. Louis will never see NFL football again, and that is just sad because it's a great city and it's a great sports town, provided that you give them a good product. And Rams and Cardinals combined, 49 years worth of football in St. Louis. What do they have to show up for? Well, the Greatest Show on Turf. As far as me looking for a new team, well, we'll see. We'll see in the coming months if I've calmed down enough to entertain that suggestion. I already know there are a few teams that will not be into consideration, and absolutely one of them will not be the Dallas Cowboys. And I know my mother would be spitting in her grave right now, me saying that, but I can also tell you towards the end, she has become a little disenchanted with the Cowboys as well, particularly after the firing of Tom Landry.
I'll start with my own personal thoughts on this situation. It's about damn time. Because the NFL really did St. Louis dirty. No question about it. Their relocation guidelines, which happened, which came as a result of, ironically, the Raiders suing to move from Oakland to L.A. in the early 80s. And brought up the whole antitrust issue. There's only one sport that has antitrust exemption, and that's baseball. And the other sports, they violate antitrust laws. They're in big trouble. And the relocation guidelines were instituted as a result of that, so that the league wouldn't get into trouble like that. Lo and behold, since then, a few teams have moved. Of course, I'll gladly go over those relocations. So obviously, the Raiders to L.A. is that first one, followed in short time by the Baltimore Colts, leaving in the middle of the night to Indianapolis. Then, of course, the St. Louis Cardinals leaving for Arizona in a situation at the time that Bill Bidwell, not Mike Bidwell, moved the Cardinals to Phoenix. The political will was not there to finance anything new in St. Louis, and from what I have heard, that Bill Bidwell was kind of heartbroken about that. Completely the opposites of Senior Stan. I guess we jump to the 90s for the next round of relocations. In 94, of course, not only did the Rams move to St. Louis, also the Raiders moved back to Oakland in the exact same Oakland Coliseum. That wasn't good enough for them in the early 80s, so why is it good enough for them in the mid-90s? A year later, Art Modell pulled his little stunts, moving the Browns to Baltimore. Cleveland successfully sued and got to keep the team name and colors and everything, and got there. And essentially got a team back a few years later. And that is how the Baltimore Ravens were born. And then the year after that, the Houston Oilers. Jeff Fisher, head coach, moved to Tennessee and become the Tennessee Titans. And expansion team 32 was initially supposed to go to L.A. And that's reinforcing my long-held stance that anything involved with stadiums and public money in California is not going to fly. That effort crashed and burned and became what is now known today as the Houston Texans. And then, of course, this whole nonsense that we just went through. Of course, a huge difference between now and what happened back then is there's, from what I gather, they don't want to go beyond 32 teams. That's just wrong. And maybe a positive out of this is maybe they may be forced to expand and remedy what they did to St. Louis and likely San Diego. Oakland is part of the Bay Area, so they'll all become Niner fans as far as I'm concerned. So that could be a possibility. I don't know. Would San Diego and Oakland, since I mentioned them, would they be open to suing the NFL over this? Maybe, but the circumstances are completely different, I think. Again, going back to that whole political will thing, Oakland just gave lip service to this whole thing. They never put together a viable plan and everything. So they deserve, they more than any of the three probably deserve to lose their team the most. In the case of San Diego, well, they did bring the issue to a public vote. And of course, it failed. It didn't even get 50% of the vote. So, and in terms of the relocation guidelines, I think Dean Spanos, especially, and Mark Davis did a lot more due diligence to try to find solutions. A fool's errand, mind you. They did more in their home areas than Stan did. And this lawsuit clearly pans it out. So I hope that this lawsuit succeeds. It will take a long time, probably years, before it comes to a conclusion, one way or another. I think the choice of venue using the Missouri state courts instead of federal courts is a excellent choice, because they're taking the NFL out of their comfort zone, and they're going to have to face the very people that they fucked over a year ago. Now, of course, you also hear from these LA idiots, and I'm getting off on a tangent here, that they're just coming home from and everything. Only one of the teams involved was actually born in LA. That would be the Chargers. You want to play that game? Home is Cleveland for the Rams, and home is Oakland for the Raiders, and even they're having to be gone. So that's garbage. That was originally a Midwestern team, and it went back to its Midwestern roots, or a different part of the Midwest, for 21 years, that you now want to pretend never happened. So when can St. Louis expect its Lombardi trophy back? If you're going to pretend that the St. Louis years never happened, well, Super Bowl 34 never happened, as far as you're concerned, Senior Stan. So yeah, I hope this case does go to trial. Absolutely. I would like to see Senior Stan and that professionally lying butt monkey of his on the stand. I'd like to see Jerry fucking Jones on the stand. I would like to see Roger Goodell on the stand. I want all those men and others to explain why they would risk losing antitrust protections all for the sake of money and intentionally fuck over the one city out of the 3 at a risk of losing teams, and did lose teams, why they chose to fuck over the one city that actually did something of substance to keep their team. Why did they give the 2 cities that did nothing a second chance when it was clear? Even the LA committee said it was clear nothing was going to get done in Oakland or San Diego. So the Chargers and the Raiders should have been the teams to move. The California solution. So yeah, count me in the hopeful crowd that good comes out of this lawsuit, that St. Louis gets some sort of a reprieve and restitution, and that the NFL and Senior Stan Kroenke especially pay for what they did.
This podcast is Uncalled For is hosted, produced, and edited by Mike Chernefsky. Opening music is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetent.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Outro music is Noise Attack by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetent.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Additional music included Morocco Sting by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetent.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. If you would like to support this podcast or any of Mike's other creative endeavors, please consider making a donation at patreon.com/Mike Chernefsky. That's MikeCzerniewski. Donations over $5 will receive a special thanks on a future podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.